off the chat this evening because it becomes a bit distracting as people follow the chat, but the Q&A section will be open for you to note your questions, and we'll try to follow them, and I will track with the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Amos, people in hands up at the question period time, which is at the end of our meeting. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Sanawas and Qualicum First Nations, and I would like to thank them for allowing us to live, work, and play in this beautiful part of Vancouver Island. We are starting off with a bit of a different top end of our proceedings this evening. We've had the request from Norberta Heinrich, president of the BC School Counselors Association, presently a counselor with our Bolinas Secondary School counseling team and a former MATA president, to join us this evening and give us some further insight into counseling and the counseling role that she wishes us to be informed of during our budget presentation. So Norberta, welcome, and hopefully you'll be live on screen with your presentation this evening. Norberta.
Thank you so much. I think my slides are available to share. I don't know if I can have the screen or share it, or I did send it to Karen to load up.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know you were giving that to me to post. You can share the screen though.
Okay.
Otherwise I can't type.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Let me just share. Will I have sharing ability for my, oh, I see my screen.
Yep, we've got it on screen.
Okay. Thank you very much. As you indicated, I am the current president of the BC School Counselors Association, but I'm really here. I'm using that hat because I've done a lot of research and talking to other counselors across the province, but what I'm really focusing, will be also focusing on, are the issues that are before us in terms of the tough decisions that the trustees have to make. But also because of budgeting, it does become about priorities and how the decision to cut our ratios, not down, but up, like increasing our ratios, how that's going to have an impact to not only counselors across the district, but particularly here at Bolinas. So first things first, why school counselors matter. School counselors support student success, safety, and well-being. They're trained mental health professionals, certified teachers. We support emotional, personal, social, emotional, behavioral, and career development. We're part of the continuum, and I'm going to try not to read the slides verbatim. That's like so frustrating. So we also support all aspects of outcomes of children. And we are a part of the school team. And then later, when I talk about workload, it's going to be highlighting these pieces about being part of the team. What does that mean? And how does that interplay with our accessibility to children? So it is fundamental to student learning. We hear about that. Our Pro-D was about, we talk about kids needing a sense of belonging in the school, well connected for them to learn. And school counselors are a key part of that. I really want to give you a highlight that when ratios were first determined, that was when I was in high school, which I'm not going to tell you how long ago because it was quite a while ago. And some of the prevalence of the issues that we face today were not in the purview of a school life so many years ago. So I just want to give you this survey about some of the things that are happening to our youth now. And we are the professionals that can support children with some of these prevalent issues that pop up for so many of these children. I'm happy to share the slides and also all the research that we have compiled. So the growing youth mental health crisis, this is what we're facing. Increased anxiety, 22% in 2023. Depression, especially in secondary students. There are increased rates of PTSD in children and youth than ever. Self-harm and suicide ideation, 24% have reported self-harm. And these are from stats like Island stats we have. Substance use concerns. One of the things that I know in the lifetime of just my teaching, I have never come across so many children that have been affected by loss of the overdose crisis. And that number has increased. Social isolation, family stress, we know it was kind of expanded from the experience of COVID. And now we know the virtual environment, social media, the exposure to sexualization and violence. So just quickly, if we look on the right, some of the ratios, our current average is 693 to 1, and you'll hear from senior admin, because we've had these conversations before, that we have much better rate. However, you're now increasing it to maybe the numbers to the end of the collective agreement, which is going to be my experience next year. However, I in all my talks with senior admin about counseling and about non-enrolling teachers, never did we kind of discuss the ratios to be the ceiling and not the floor. US national average, but it just was announced, like it was announced just 2 years ago, and like 4 years ago in PEI, they reduced it based on facts of knowing for a particular number. 396, 376 are the numbers that we experience in counseling at Bolinas, but we're not going to see that now. We're going to be seeing closer to the 500 per one, and I know that the district is also making cuts. So I'm fully aware that I'm a counselor at Bolinas, and I'm assigned to staff, and it could say, well, you know, your admin didn't provide additional staffing for counseling, but they can't, because I looked at the board, I look how many classes, I'm the one who's loading students in, and I'm already seeing classes of over 29 as we're loading them in, which is going to be a problem already for some of us. So I don't see how my own admin at our school site can add without additional resources. So we know that with the higher ratios, we're going to have issues with being a triage center only, reactive care instead of the interventions and the preventative care and support that we provide. And of course, it may lead to burnout because this was barely manageable. I don't know what's going to mean for me next year. And I take my job very seriously, and the mental health of students and the support of the school very seriously as well. This just gives you a scope of just a quick view of the counselor, of the students to school counselor ratio and what's suggested and where we lie. Okay, so changes over time. Again, when this collective agreement was first negotiated, before it was stripped, I don't have time to give you a bargaining 101. Happy to do that in another meeting. But counseling then, school counselors weren't required to have a master's in counseling. They focused on course selections. But you got to understand that families were nuclear and supported by extended family. Families shared meals, time together, no pandemic experience. Now we're going to look over to the now. We are mental health professionals. In fact, I'm an RCC. I'm a specialist in trauma care, and I'm taking coursework in another modality of therapy. So school counselors, we're counselors, consultants, collaborators, and coordinators. And and then families look vastly different. So quickly, in a nutshell, we know that families have changed. We have more families of children being raised, children and youth being raised by their grandparents. We know that the housing affordability is an issue. We have increased poverty, 16.7% of youth. We have post-pandemic challenges, and we could also spend another 10 minutes talking about social media and online influences and the harm it's causing children and youth. So trauma, we have increased dysregulation in students. We have earlier onset of substance use, dependence, and suicide ideation. In fact, in my association, we have a working group working with Children's Hospital, creating resources for suicide ideation for children under 12. We have an increased need to support the human rights and the rights of the child, increased complexity, and we know that the skill level of students have decreased, and those lagging skills are causing huge anxiety and withdrawal. So sharing that the above ratios does not recognize and acknowledge our current crisis. We're in a crisis, and the need for adequate staffing of our mental health professionals in our schools. We are mental health professionals. What happens when you make cuts? Reducing access to mental health support. And we're going to see an increase of crisis situations because we're not building the relationship of mitigating. The students that want to see me on a regular basis will not be able to do so. And it saves them from complete dysregulation and upset and deterioration of their own mental health. Also, we're a resource for staff that will increase the strain in school staff. And I truly believe it will weaken the school climate and student connection, which is what we're talking about, what we're all about. Somehow I'm seeing a disconnect by reducing counselors in schools. We are an upstream solution. So research shows this. So I have just one article that talks about the improvements of aspects of a student's well-being, academic achievement, and that's just one study. We know there's a social impact for every $1 invested in school counseling generates approximately 1.62 in social value. So those are studies that have been done as well, and I'll give you the full list after my presentation. So a student without timely access is key. We talk about students feeling connected and supported. Their anxiety will worsen. We can improve the attendance because we're connecting with kids, we're reaching out to home, we're finding out what they need. And long-term crisis escalation may be prevented. I've seen that just this morning of a student coming to see me first thing in the morning to talk to me, to talk about their weekend because we knew it was going to be a difficult one. Students need more access and not less. The reasons are clear there. We have many vulnerable youth. We need to be accessible to them. And here is, like I said, I'm happy to share the presentation. But the other piece that I want to share, and I'll stop sharing. Okay, does it look like I've stopped sharing?
Yep, yep, you're back on
Okay.
screen.
Okay, so there's such more to this in terms of like my role here at the high school. We do so many other things. We do so many other things. So the other thing about high school I want to mention, so this folder right here, these are the grads. Guess what? I track their courses, if they're going to get their credits. I sit down with them, I review it all, and I'm a key person to talk to teachers, find out if they have an IE. By the way, this is the stack of the IEs that I follow up with every student that has an IE from a classroom. That means that they're not finding success. Their teacher is finding a way through a package to find success, but I'm also following up with what they're doing. Oh, and there's students that are disciplined, and this is the folder that I use when and refer to when students are disciplined, because guess what? They need a counselor to talk about why they're not following the code of conduct, why it's difficult to follow the code of conduct, who they're in conflict with, what is happening in their lives, and how can we have them regulate and engage in school and follow the code of conduct. And that's not my big binder of my, because I also case management. So that's another part of my role that's been given to me, and not just counseling. So when we talk about these ratios, you're thinking, oh, these many students can access the counselor at the time. It's not all that I do. And right now we're dealing with course selection and timetable. I don't think in the 80s, like in Bolinas at this current time, we had a term timetable, semestered, linear, outside of the timetable, working with dual credit, more international students, special programs, working closely with our DL program, with our online program, and where we're also monitoring. I don't think those were parts of the job of a counselor in the 80s when that ratio was first negotiated. And it is an important job. I take this job very seriously. I know every one of my colleagues in this district does. They put their heart and soul into this work, and to be told that we need to do more with less can only lead to burnout. I was at a talk, I'm part of a panel, and I described burnout as the one point in what you want to provide to children, your wants and needs for your professional and your personal self to provide to children, and what you're resourced with. And all that vast expanse in between is where burnout lies. And so I urge the board to reconsider the cuts being made to counseling, and I could expand that to all non-enrolling teachers and really think on how that cut is going to trickle down to every aspect and fiber of our school life culture, and how that aligns with your priorities, and not only the priorities, the goals in which you framed those priorities in which to reach the goals in terms of supporting our children and youth in our community. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I think, Norberta, we won't take questions because we have a big presentation here for our Secretary Treasurer. So I thank you, Trustee
just wanted-
Alston.
I just wanted to, Roberta, could you ensure that the trustees get a copy of that presentation, please? Because
Yes.
if I
It's been
watch it
sent.
from the, oh, I
It's been
didn't get it
sent.
yet. Okay,
I've sent
great.
it to
I'll have
you.
to look
Yep.
for it.
It's
Okay,
already
great.
been
Thanks.
sent.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. So thank you very much, Norberta, for your time. Appreciate your insight. And I'll turn it over now to Secretary Treasurer Ron Amos for our budget considerations in an even bigger picture.
Thank you, Chair Flynn. Hopefully you can hear me. I'll
Yep.
share my screen and we'll just dig right in. I'm not sure, I can't remember if the chair noted, but even though we're scheduled till 7:30, certainly if we want to extend, obviously the chair has that ability to extend the meeting beyond the pockets of time. And again, so we'll see how far I can get in this presentation, and then we can sort of look at the time as we go along. So this is what we're covering: budget process to date, budget survey results. Many of you have seen this this agenda type scenario, how I walk through the presentation, operating grant, bringing you up to date basically on the new March announcements, any cost pressures that are just worth noting, budget response consideration, and you'll sort of hear the commentary of what we're considering and then the next steps going forward. Annual budget cycle, we're now in the April-June section, follow up with partners, public, board, and management discussions so that the annual budget can be adopted by June 30th. When last we met, put it that way, the grant announcement came, and so I'll be sharing a little bit about the grant announcement and what it means to, again, the environmental, the budget picture and how that impacts our planning. Yeah, so many of you have seen this before. I don't really need to recycle that. Budget planning. So the survey's gone out. We generally open up the survey in February of each year, and I keep it open for as long as possible, recognizing that it gives an opportunity for many different avenues to, or many different individuals to participate. By and large, and again, here's the 26, 27 survey participants, about 175 we heard from. Clearly the preponderance of the individuals are parents and caregivers. This is their opportunity through the survey to give feedback on multiple areas that we want to consider and how they align to the board deliberations. So again, but clearly about 60% are coming from parents and caregivers, but we do have it open for community members, support staff, our teachers, and our administrators. Students have access to it, but generally the last couple of years haven't availed themselves to it. I spoke to this at our committee of the whole, but I will just comment again today, earlier today. Positive feedback, general themes were staff dedication, families frequently praise teachers, EAs, and support staff for their caring, committed work. Indigenous learning, strong appreciation for the natural integration of Indigenous culture, language, and land-based learning. I commented earlier that this is quite a bit of this effort is coming from the Indigenous Education Council that District Principal Katie Marin leads in those discussions and the work that they do in embedding the Indigenous language learning, the Indigenous learning beyond just the language, but into the culture and into the core curriculum. Outdoor and experiential learning obviously are positive takeaways for parents. Value outdoor programs, outdoor educations. They value trade exposure and the hands-on learning opportunities when they come to them. Libraries and literacy, well-stocked libraries, active literacy support were highlighted as strengths. In light of our work on the transportation, many of you who have been involved in the finance and ops committee of the whole, as well as some of our communication out, know that we've introduced some software into the transportation department, and so now that we're into our second year, There was wonder at kind of the parental level of how that's going to impact them and their experience, their kids' experience. But clearly, it's not taking away from that positive experience. Friendly, reliable bus drivers contributed to smooth routines for many students, even in light of sort of startups that were kind of we're slow in starting off in September as we encourage more and more parents to sign up early so that we don't have to stop and start our runs in September in order to get more of the in-catchment kids on the bus that should be riding. Some of the challenges that were observed, more in-school support needs. Some of these things are many will remember from a couple of years and the last few years. These seem to be pervasive over a number of years. Again, strong need for classroom support focusing on numeracy and literacy. And I made the comment that Superintendent Jory has focused a little bit on this in his report outs on how we're doing as a school against the province, how we're doing against with our grad rates and that kind of stuff. Clearly we're doing good work as we continue to drive home these areas. Support for students with special needs, concerns about access to speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, counseling, and assessments, additional EAs in the system. School facilities tends to be a reoccurring theme, aging buildings, washroom cleanliness. I kind of alluded to the fact that as we find funds within our minor capital, we can address some of these things. The ministry recognizes that we have fairly new facilities in light of this, the 1980s and 90s when several new schools were built, but clearly they're aging with time and now needing additional work. KSS and Bolinas and Qualicum Secondary both had washroom upgrades to deal with the safety element that we heard in past. Heating and outdoor learning spaces continues to be a wonder. Particularly, I just read a recent parent contribution to the survey talked about the outdoor learning spaces and the wants at KSS. And again, so I just kind of commented that there are a couple of things that are in the planning works at KSS with a basketball court being planned, as well as an outdoor learning space at that site. So as funds come forward, as we find different avenues to support these things, we can kind of find the resources. They won't necessarily come from our operating budget, but they could potentially come from some of our capital budgets. Needs for better communication. So again, recognizing that this has been a theme the last couple of years, the communications working committee had been meeting for the last year almost, and delivered a communication plan to the board last month. And so there is an element of that within the recommendations that you're going to see later on in this presentation. Financial concerns, the frustration about spending priorities and transparencies, clearer information with district finances. Again, we do our best in terms of being able to deliver financial statements and summaries that are not just directed by the ministry, but actually are readable to the user. And so we have had various additional statements that we release with the financial statements to make it easier. And so I encourage you to sort of take the opportunity to go to our website to read some of these additional supporting documents that try to bring transparency to what we do and clearer information about the finances. But that said, I recognize that not all the time, it's not always obvious. Sometimes you got to look for it. And so even with our new web portal that will be released in the next few weeks, we're trying to address better transparency on our web page so that these things are more obvious. So like I said, that's the general themes that we've heard going into this budget process. And so, as I say, between February and now, obviously the budget or the government budget dropped, as it were, the writ dropped. And so the budget was announced in early March within the context of a growing provincial budget deficit. It now sits at 13.3 billion going into the 26-27 fiscal year. However, they're trying to support critical services such as healthcare and education. Those two areas were absolutely mentioned in the budget, saying these are the areas that we recognize need to be preserved, even though there were some additional cuts in some of the ministry programs and in ministry staff. Likewise, they indicated that there's continued support for the Child Care BC and food programs in an effort to stabilize the programs and services, knowing that annually in the past, we've always wondered whether or not there would be more money the following year. It was never kind of something that we could plan on, but clearly what they're trying to do is provide that stability by saying it's either permanent or it's at least a 3-year window. So those things were mentioned in the budget. So when it comes to us for capital, so again, just sort of highlighting some of the investments that BC has done in our future, as it were. Our new minor capital projects, if you've been paying attention to some of our board meetings, the roofing replacement was announced last month for Arrington Elementary to the tune of $1.05 million. HVAC upgrades, 2 programs were asked and received approval for a total of $465,000. The food infrastructure upgrades for Bolinas and Bowser combined area. This is money that was released with the food programs that, again, we don't know how long this program will last, but certainly while it's out there, we will continue to apply for it to upgrade our kitchens in each of our schools and to support the food programs at each of those sites according to what they need. Likewise, ongoing supported major capital programs or projects, the False Bay School replacement. In our Finance and Operations Director of Operations Monroe gave an update on the False Bay replacement. It's slated for, you can see that it's slated for opening in September 2028. At present, it's about a $14.5 million project. He was able to inform the board today that based on escalating costs, the ministry continues to support this program or this project, knowing that the costs are going up. And so it continues to be a priority for the government, clearly, and we'll continue to work through the delivery of this project by September of 2028. He also delivered an update on the Qualicum Beach childcare. So many of you are familiar with Qualicum Beach Elementary. There's this facility going up there, a childcare facility. Plan again, and what you're seeing is a planned completion date of February of next year. It's about a $4.9 million build. So those things clearly are carrying on the work as we find new avenues for the minor works and then new avenues for some of these major capital works. The other funding, 3 funding areas: operating fund that I'll talk to shortly, special purpose funds, and capital funds. So the special purpose funds, the messaging from the government was supporting families through childcare and food programs. And so we did get confirmation that the district early learning and childcare leads. This is the work that our principal of early learning, district principal of early learning, Sheila, supports and continues to work on. And so that money has been committed for another 2 years. And likewise, the food program is continued to be supported. I believe it's out to 3 years, and I believe the national food program is in perpetuity, or I guess until the next government comes in federally. Most other special purposes we learned remain in place. The classroom enhancement funds, you can see what it addresses: class size and composition language. Learning improvement funds, bargain for supports to support EAs. Community links funds to address student vulnerability. These funds remain in place. French federal grant complements the French immersion and core French programs, and the BCT funding to enhance First Nations transportation needs. Those items carry on. What we heard prior to this and had been previously announced, the Seamless Day childcare pilot funds will cease going into next year. So we're having to make we have to recognize that those funds will cease to come. And likewise, the mental health funds have not been renewed going forward. So from the operating grant, provincial education funding remains at 7.2. It was 7.2 going into this budget year, 25-26. It remains at 7.2. And again, this is really recognizing that they didn't decrease us, but they really haven't increased us. There's no change in the per pupil rates. It's and I'll show you a slide after here. That the majority of our funds come to us in the form of a per pupil rate. We talk about our counts in September, February, and May. Those counts of kids generate obviously the revenues that support the programming that we do in the district. So no change in the per pupil rates, neither the basic or the unique student needs allocations. They remain at the 25-26 levels. Provincial enrollment is projected to decrease by 5,727. So part of the ministry's good news story, I guess you would call it, is that even though the FTE or the student counts are going down, they're keeping the value in education at the same levels. So again, that's how they sort of tell the story, but recognizing that there's without the per pupil changes, there's no new money for some of the cost escalations that every district in the province is suffering from. 51, yeah, and so just anecdotally, 51 of the 60 school districts are projecting a decline in students. 46 districts have a decrease in operating grants year over year, and then 23 districts will be in funding protection. And what that means is they have funding reductions of greater than 1.5%, our grant reductions. And we were in that position this time last year. We were in funding protection. But by September, we had additional growth that allowed us to pay back the funding protection and beyond. The other messaging that came from the budget announcement was that unique student needs continues to grow. And again, clearly this is the messaging that Norberta was addressing in terms of the kids. The kids still need supports. There are still more kids in the system needing, in this case, unique student needs. That's not going away. And in fact, it's escalating over the course of time. Even though the general population of students is going down. But the difficulty that we have, and we'll talk about that when we talk about responses, is that there are no new funds to support this growing complement of kids. So we talked in terms of what we thought the projection would be. Now that we've put the projection into the system and the generated grants from that. So we did put in for a 99.75 FTE student decline. And again, the messaging for us in previous discussions is that the grade cohorts are getting smaller. And the grade complement between the graduating class and the incoming kindergarten class is much deeper this year. And the net migration coming into us through just natural migration into the district isn't going to be able to offset that differential. And then overall, the cohorts are getting smaller is what we're indicating. So you can see how in about 20 in the school year 2021, we kind of capped out. That was right in the year of COVID. And so what ended up happening was our online learners went up substantially to support the kids. And so that's what you're seeing, a little bit of a bump there. And then we plateaued in the next 4 years. And then obviously after last year, we've been declining, and that declining will continue. It'll slow down over the next 5 years, but certainly in the next 2 or 3 years, it will be at the level that you're looking at right now, which is about 100 kids decline. So that decline of 100 students feeds into the operating grant discussion. And so walking down from the top, I'm showing you in the blue the operating grant that we received in the current year, though. So based on December's operating grant, recalculated, and then going forward, what that preliminary FTE will generate to us in grants. And so you can see that in that FTE base allocation, because we're declining by 100 kids, that equates to about $900,000 in reduced enrollment-based allocations. Plus, we get supplements. We get a supplement for enrollment decline. So districts that are declining between 1% and 4% get an increase, or get a supplemental sort of thing, sort of value to hold them somewhat, so that they can reduce programs in time. And so that's what you're seeing. So we've got a supplement grant of about $256,000 this year. The next supplement, one for unique student needs, I talked about earlier in terms of our enrollment is going down in that case. Provincially, it's going up, but we've got a large grad class exiting, and so we projected a smaller unique student needs, and it's generating less funds in that area. The salary differential is just an amount of value that supports district with against the teacher average costs. So if you have if you've got a high average teacher costs, the idea that the ministry is going to support you for that higher value, because potentially you've got older complement of teachers that are higher in the grid level. So anyways, but for us, again, it's relatively unchanged year over year, but sometimes you do see some increases. Unique geographic factors takes into quite a few different complementary items. Our heating and cooling costs, our distance to metropolitan centers, our transportation disparity in terms of how our kids are spread out around our district, and how that might feed into a transportation costs. Other areas in here are and so what I've highlighted here is a small community. So you have large secondaries, small secondaries get additional funds. And so in our case, False Bay, we introduced secondary. Originally False Bay was a K-8. With September's, we introduced it or we extended it to grade 12. And so because of that, it is now considered a small secondary, which generates a little bit of additional funding to support the programming that goes into a small secondary site. So that's total. And then you've got Indigenous Ed Council. I kind of commented on that earlier. This is new funding over the last 2.5 years now. Last year it was current year about 77,700. Going forward, it's about 29,000, and I think that'll be the last year for it. It was meant as capacity building, and so 2.5 years of I guess capacity building before they move this funding into something different. Curriculum and learning support funding, that's just an ongoing support for the new curriculum, the new learning supports that has been in the system now for about 8 years, but it continues, thankfully. I commented on funding protection. This year you're seeing it as 0. Again, funding in this element is for if you lose more than 1.5% of your grant year over year, they'll top you up to a certain portion. So the net differential is about 804,611 grant reduction, and that'll start the first line of our operating funding gap. Summer February and May counts, we're just sort of predicting the same values that we predicted last year. So no change there generally. Sometimes we see some fluctuations in the February count, but we're anticipating the same value going forward. Cost pressures. So many of you have seen this before. Benefit costs continue to pressure budgets. And my messaging here is some of the cost drivers are within our influence. WorkSafe, by us doing better with health and safety elements for our staff. If we can reduce the number of claims, then we can do better in terms of how much we are penalized, as it were, in the WorkSafe claims. And so clearly we can influence that, but most of the other benefit pressures are beyond our ability to change. The pension plan is what, again, we have teacher pension, we've got municipal pension that the rates are set by their independent boards. And the employer costs are borne according to the rates set by their elected bodies or appointed bodies in that case. Extended health and dental, it's a combination of the bargaining work that's done at the table in terms of additional supports or additional benefits that are bargained. They sometimes impact our rate structures. And likewise, just the element of increased usage of the benefits and increased costs of the benefits is escalating in time. And again, I talked about over the course of time, you can see in about 2021, 22, they were fairly flat in terms of any of the adjustments were on account generally of the pension making rate changes, or occasionally we had a little bit of a savings in the benefits that might have been too high from the previous year. They created surpluses. We were able to take some benefit holidays in some of these areas because the surpluses were being generated. Those surpluses have gone away at the vendor side, and now most costs are being passed directly on to the employer in our case, and that's what you're seeing. The greater impact following COVID is this escalating increase against our salaries. So for context, you can see that in 17-18. So even though it was about 8,000, it was about 25.7% of our salary costs, our total salary costs. Over the course of time, it's fluctuated a little bit in terms of that percentage, but then you're seeing in about 22, 23, it's starting to escalate a little bit higher, from 25 even to 25.7 to 26.9 to 27.3. Our budget this year was fixed at 27.9. And so between 17-18 and 25-26, you can see that there's an additional about 3.25 million, of which some of it is because of the increasing costs of salaries, but certainly there's an element of increased burden of benefits that isn't found any other way except through other operating funds. And so you'll see a line item in here, as I always try to cover off our benefit costs, because there's no other area that covers it off. It has to come from the operating fund. The other area that we've seen in the last 4 years, the other area of escalation is the cost pressures due to our paid sick leave usage. And again, this is just a commentary on the post-pandemic, on globally how employees in general are responding post-pandemic in terms of utilizing their sick leave more often. And I break it down between longer leaves or longer sick time off, as well as more incidences of sick time taken, kind of thing. And so that's what you're seeing across all of our employee groups, teachers, QP, and management. They've all escalated from this flat zone here over the course of time and have been progressively increasing with time. And so it's just one more pressure on the budgets that we have to keep in mind as we have these conversations around the budget gap. Okay, so as I say, so the revenue drop for that 100 or reduced operating grant for that 100 FTE, about 805,000. Then we look at some of these other annual adjustments that we have to make to our budget. And so I've put a line in there for cost escalations for benefits beyond what's covered now. I've got in there a projected based on estimated rates. We haven't got our full our July 1st rates yet, so I'm putting in a projection of about 75,000, hoping that'll cover off the increases beyond what the labor settlement funding will cover. Cost escalations and replacement. Early, and this is for this year, early demographics show that we might be utilizing less replacement or less sick time per FTE. So I'm crossing my fingers at this point that the replacements that we have in the budget, the value that we have in the budget is enough to cover us going forward into 26, 27. So at this point, I don't have a line item in there, but I do have it as kind of a holding as we will look at this again when we do the amended budget in January of 27. Labor settlement costs, as many of you know, the teachers' labor settlement has now been ratified at the provincial and local tables. And so that will have implications, but at this, it's actually as of Friday, we now know what the 25, 26 labor settlement funds are, but we don't know what 26, 27 looks like. So it's not yet announced in terms of what the costs or what the additional funding will be for school districts. Exempt staff increases, again, funding not yet known for 26, 27. What I was able to share earlier was that for 25, 26, the ministry is going to fund exempt staff increases, but we don't yet know if they'll revert back to the old model, which was districts had to find the funds themselves to support this increase. And so we've got this line item in there for now. It could cost us as much as $160,000 going forward in terms of what that exempt staff increase if it's not funded. Or board election costs, again, a one-time cost. As we know, the fall has a board election. I say one time only because once every 4 years, the board gets elected. And therefore you're only paying for it once when you have the municipalities run our elections. Next year in 27, 28, that value will come back out of the as a line item. International student programs, again, we had this conversation earlier today in terms of the impact of the global economy, the impact of sort of local concerns, provincial concerns on the risks of international programs, sending their kids to BC, sending their kids to Canada, the impact of the reduced federal visa programs. It's all having an impact on our international student program. And so again, all we're doing is recognizing that there will be a smaller program next year to the tune of about 150,000 net differential to our net contribution. So again, it's an impact on the funds, the operating funds that we have got to consider. The Indigenous Ed targeted funding is something that was brought forward by the IEC last year. And so the request at the time was for their administrative costs to be borne by the core funding and not from targeted funding. So in honor of that, this would be year 2 of a 3-year increase, moving it again from targeted funding to the core funding. So it's a cost of $60,000. So those annual adjustments you can see is about 1.335. Adding to that are new items for consideration, planning and priorities is the theme. Superintendent Jory might want to chime in, but I'll just introduce these three concepts. Collaborative teaching team, we talked about at a couple of areas in order to support that collaborated effort. Mentorship is a shared partnership with our local teachers association. So it would be a contribution of 30 from us and 30 from them if this is supported. To jointly develop a mentorship program. And as I talked to earlier about the communication working group, they didn't actually put a value to their ask, but certainly we're just opening the table on the wonder of putting some money to support something going forward into the 26-27 planning year. So with those new items of 200,000, we're looking at a possible funding shortfall of about 1.535. It looks daunting, and we'll share out the response, but I won't say, but putting into perspective, this time last year we were looking at about a $2.5 million funding shortfall, and so it's less than last year. It still will hurt, but recognizing that we do have a plan that we'll show you shortly. I'll open it up to senior leaders if they do want to speak to any of these items at this point, or I can carry on. Sounds like a carry on.
Yep, nose hand. Oh,
No,
Dr. Jory. Dr. Jory.
Yeah, thanks, Secretary Treasurer Amos. Just the collaborative teaching team, the proposal that we've been working on with the MATA would be approximately 5 teachers, 0.2 to start, and be supportive of, like you said, collaboration, but working with their colleagues to advance the school plan and the district strategic plan, focusing on instruction. Of course, mentorship. Again, you spoke of the partnership there, opportunity for teachers in groups, probably grade groups or curricular groups to look at the curriculum and plan, and the communication plan really is about supporting specific work and acquiring some expertise to work on our communication strategies in alignment with that plan, in support of that plan. So those are 3 things that we've put forward as possible things for the Board of Education to support.
Thank you, Superintendent Jory. Okay. So budget response considerations. So in the past, our order of response tended to be, and this is the last 5 years, we would generally target supplies and services first. So we'd go after school supply budgets, we'd go after planning funds, we'd go after equipment replacement budgets. Ongoing and beyond, of course, are looking for efficiencies, monitoring utilities. Our bus routes, I talked about that in terms of our ability to make them more efficient, as well as the replacements of our sick time and how we replaced individuals who were sick, whether or not we replace them on day 1 or we replace some areas on day 2. Knowing that classroom teachers are always replaced on day 1, but some of the non-enrolling staff, some of the custodial staff are replaced maybe after a day if it can be supported by the school's current staff. So that's been the approach in the past. What necessitated last year's big area, of course, so we needed to address it through larger, because of that $2.5 million deficit, we needed to get into the staffing reductions where necessary. So in that case, again, it's a staged approach in terms of as much as we can, we want to tie them to enrollment declines. And so clearly, even before last year, if we lost students, it would have an obvious effect on the number of divisions that we would need in the elementary and secondary levels. And so therefore there was a corresponding effect that as enrollment declined in certain schools and in terms of how the demographics fell into each school, we would support it by obviously making division changes. So clearly that's classroom divisions rise and fall, and the district with the district enrollments, we'll make adjustments accordingly. Likewise, when we saw earlier, this is again coming out of the COVID years 23, 24, our alternate program and our online program saw reduced enrollment, and so as a result, we reduced the number of the number of teachers that were supporting those programs. So we adjusted. We continue to always monitor how many students are coming in so that we can address it in terms of the staffing needs to address those kids. And likewise, if it's student services from that element, EA hours were held back due to lower student needs. And again, so all we're trying to do is say that at first, we'll always look at it and try to tie it back to enrollment. When we go beyond that, then we obviously have to go deeper, if you want, into staffing and sometimes address it through the non-enrolling positions where possible. Meanwhile, maintain the collective agreement ratios that Norberta alluded to earlier. And then lastly, last year, we actually made reductions beyond what you're going to see today. We made reductions in other support staff. We looked at custodial staff. We looked at trade staff. We looked at library and clerical. We looked at administrative positions that came up for consideration because they were retirements or resignations. And so we made reductions in those areas too. But going forward in the 26 that you'll see shortly, the impact is mostly will be on staffing tied to not just the enrollment clients, but where possible, the non-enrolling. So what we're proposing, the recommended response is we are going to see additional revenues in two areas in our childcare fees from additional centers. That'll make a contribution against the funding gap, as it were, about 150,000. We're seeing, or there's a growth, an expansion of the ICY program, and so there's additional provincial funds coming to us to the tune of about 145,000. That's about, in total between the two, about a $300,000 additional revenue. It will cut our response down, as it were. And so without going back to the times when we had to reduce supplies and services and we had to reduce what we did last year in terms of those additional staffing, we're keeping it against the enrollment related classroom teaching. And so we've reduced the elementary class divisions because that's where we're seeing the biggest decline in our enrollment. And likewise in our alternate program, KEEP. Tying some of the reductions to the program changes that are happening over there. Of the non-enrolling staff, and like I said, I'll introduce this, but if senior leaders want to make any comments, don't hesitate to interject. So from the non-enrolling side, we're recommending 3 FTE to come from the learning support or the integrated support teaching staff. And again, this just means reducing hours being allocated to the schools. Non-enrolling, as talked about by Norberta, the counseling staff, we're recommending a 0.8 reduction in the counseling. And again, it's not one area, it's how that value is allocated across all schools. On the support staff side, in reducing in the educational assistants, CYCWs or social workers that we have kind of forming the support mechanism of our unique student needs. But again, it's all enrollment related and a reduction of about 105 hours or 3 FTE. Those 4 areas will get us the 1.225 million. The sum of the two will get us to the 1.5 that is needed to respond to that gap that we were speaking of earlier. Okay. Likely more questions will come up after all of this, and I'll just carry on while I've got the attention. Yeah. So I'll carry on. There's a couple of questions. There's one question that came up early that I want to respond to, but I'll just finish off my slide deck and respond to that question, and then we'll open it up. So that's the operating fund. Again, just so that we always are mindful of the two other funds that are percolating, as it were. So special purpose funds, we know that the mental health funding ends at the end of this year, but certainly we can, there's probably sufficient district budgets that we can support some of this going forward. The seamless daycare, the pilot program, as I indicated earlier, I think the intention is to expand the before and after school program at Arrington to support the families. It won't be an integrated approach, but it will be a continued childcare program on that site. And then, as I spoke to earlier, the early care and learning programs, which is now transitioning to early learning and childcare leads, is being extended for 2 years. And so we've got, if you want some relief in that, to the idea being we've got 2 years to work our way to sustain this in-house and not to depend on the additional funding. Lastly is local capital. Again, I got a comment at the bottom there for later discussion once the project costs and year-end financials are known. So clearly this is an area that has come under consideration. Now that we've sold French Creek School, it created a $1.3 million local capital fund that we can kind of work on with the intention of adding to that through either additional operating funds or future property sales yet to be determined. But clearly prioritization and costs still are to be determined. But clearly we've got some funds now to address these areas that in the past we had to find room within our operating fund to support these things. And you can see the list that's on there in terms of how we could do it over a 3-year, 4 or 5 year period. Much more on that later. Yeah, much more on this later as we kind of introduce the conversation at the board table and defining through our financial statement preparations and future planning conversations. So that's it for the slide deck. So we did have a submitted written question that I'll speak to in the next 2 slides. So the question was, MATA has identified that the administrator to teacher ratio is higher than the provincial average and historical district levels. Can the board provide a line item comparison of FTE reductions in district administration versus classroom instruction for the 26-27 budget cycle? So I broke it down into the 2 parts. The first part being Matt spoke to this, I believe, I'm not sure if he spoke to it last year, but certainly I remember him speaking to it at the beginning of our budget conversations in terms of this administrator to teacher ratio. And he's speaking to, from the ministry's data set, the all educator value that anyone can find on the provincial website. And so what I've done is exactly what I think Matt was speaking to, was if you divide the number of school administrators that you have divided by the number of teachers that you have in the district, you can get yourself a value. And so absolutely to his point, Qualicum School District is higher than the provincial average. So you can see the provincial average is 0.08. And I flipped it because it's easier for me to understand a little bit. I've done the reciprocal, which means about 11.9 teachers per FTE principal. But in context to the statement, our average is higher, but our peer group, which is like-sized district with like-sized schools, because we don't have the Vancouver, Surrey, Souk models of secondaries that are pushing 2,500 kids. We don't have elementaries that are pushing 850 kids. So relatively speaking, our schools against our peer group are about the same size. So it's a good comparator. So you can see that that we sit at the red. So we're sitting at this 0.11. The provincial average is in fact just above 0.08. And the peer group of what you're seeing on here, so the school districts that are between 3,000 and 7,500, is about 0.12, so slightly lower than our peer group. And that's not judging, that's really just sort of putting it into context against like-sized school districts. So I speak to school administration first. That's the first part of this question. School administrators made up of principals and vice principals, and currently we have about 21 in, not about, we have 21 in this group. So the second part of this question speaks to the line item comparison of FTE reductions. So I'm showing what we did last year in the 25-26 year. So again, we were looking at that time, we were looking to find 2.5 million in reductions. And so as you'll recollect from last year, we found 4.4 classroom divisions to be reduced in the classroom side of teaching. In the non-enrolling side, we reduced by 6.6 in teaching learning, at the NRT program and the CST. Trying to think of what that means. Curriculum support teachers, there we go. Yes, and so we've reduced allocations at the teacher level to a tune of 11.0. At the support side, we cut deeper into more areas because it's one of those things that it's some of those areas you can't address every year. We would never entertain reducing our clerical and library systems every year, but it is something that maybe every 5 to 8 years you've got to address if you're declining. So that's what we did last year. We made some deeper cuts in their operations and maintenance staff, trades and custodial, we've reduced by 4. The inclusive education, again, targeting it against the reduced student counts, we reduced by 3 FTE. Like I said, clerical and library assistants, we've reduced by 2 FTE overall. And then as retirements or resignations come forward, then we can address the administration, the wants to reduce in those areas. And last year we were able to reduce by 3 FTE in those areas. In each of those cases, 254 is what remained in teaching, 185 remained in support staff, and 44 in admin. So what this looks like, based on that previous slide deck, so classroom teachers at elementary and KEEP, reducing by 4.1, again, enrollment related. Non-enrolling counselors, reducing by 0.8. Non-enrolling learning support or integrated support, allocations of 3 FTE. Coming back because the Indigenous Ed are adding value from their targeted funds. We're adding back they're adding back 1.5 FTE. So it's a net decline of about 6.4. In teaching support staff, the EAs, again, just recognizing it's 3.0 this year against the 9 last year. And then because of that additional funding coming to us through the provincial ICY program, we're adding an administrative position or an exempt position that's adding value to that. But again, putting it in perspective, district administration is made up of district principals, senior leadership, directors of instruction, directors of operation, director of instruction, human resources. We've got managers under that. We've got coordinators, supervisors, and assistants. Again, currently in this group, it's about 23 FTE. So hopefully that answers the question that was brought forward. Norberto, so we skipped ahead a bit, but yeah, that's okay.
My bad.
It's okay. I'm gonna take this off the screen, but but again, we'll open it up when we're off screen. But again, recognizing that after this conversation that we next have, the board will take some of this conversation. They might direct staff on further information so that we can deliver them a document or a budget document next Tuesday, the 26th, for them to deliberate on. And again, it's their discretion whether they approve the budget, but they have at least until June 30th to approve and adopt. Okay, that's mine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amos. That's a long time to chat, have a drink of water and such. And and a lot for everyone to digest, I'm sure. Please use your raise hand feature if you wish to ask questions, because I've got about 7 pages of folks that I can't see necessarily everyone. So I'll turn first to our Madam President, Matt Wood. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Chair Flynn, and thank you, Ron, for your report that's always detailed and well-informed. And I appreciate you putting out that question and coming back with what you produced tonight. So thank you very much for that. I basically kind of have 2 questions, if I can be allowed to ask them. And the first one will have to deal with the ISP program. And I'm just interested to know that you said there's $150,000, I think on the one slide that, we're not going to see any revenue from, but the ISP program produces a $850,000 surplus. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
That is correct.
How do you get a reduction when you're in a program that produces a surplus?
Well, the revenue is going to go down and the expenditures are going down, but whether or not that 150 is the amount of burden that's being shifted from the ISP to the overall budget.
Okay. And then I guess my second question is regarding the numbers that you showed just those last couple of slides regarding administration. When I review our seniority list with the number of administrators, not counting senior administrators, I get 28, not 21. And if I count senior administrators off the top of my head, 8, I'm thinking of, I guess, that's more like 35. So the numbers, I'm not sure where you get your 21 and 23 come from.
So 21 school
Yeah.
administrators and 6 district principals. So we're currently running 27 principals, vice principals.
Yeah, I have 28 on my sheet. And then the district admin team, which is part of that as well, would be how many numbers in that piece?
So, so if you take 26 out of the 23 that I talked to on here, quickly share this. So if you take 6 out of, so there's 17 left. So there's 17 exempt staff that are made up of senior leadership. So and again, depending on how you qualify senior leaders, superintendent, associate superintendent, secretary, treasurer, that's 3. Directors are 3. So we've got a director of instruction, we've got a director of operations, we've got a director of instruction HR. We've got 2 managers of operations. We've got an HR coordinator. We've got a payroll supervisor. We've got executive assistants. We've got HR assistants in that mix.
Right.
And then the ISP have
ISP.
homestay coordinators. Who am I missing? There was
the ICY clinical counselors.
there we go. Thank you.
Our social worker.
So that's an additional 23 on top of the 27 or 28 PVP?
Correct. The sum of the 2 is 44, right? So 44 in the school principals and vice principals, and 23 that makes up what I'm calling district administration, including district principals.
And you're saying in your presentation that those numbers are on par with other districts of similar size, meaning that they have about 27 to 29 PVP plus 23 district admin?
Where this breaks down, again, I'm just where this breaks down is on this sheet.
Yeah.
They don't report, they only report educators in that number. And so they define school principals as educators, and teachers are teachers. They don't include in this value, this data set, they don't include senior leaders. They don't clearly they don't include non-educator exempt staff. They only refer, school administration is only referred to as the principals and vice principals. And it breaks down even further because it depends how districts are reporting their directors of instruction. Generally speaking, they are educators. And the district principals are educators, but some don't report that way.
Okay, yeah, I see in the slide there, you have 21, right? So that should probably say 28. In that group, but that's what I currently have.
21 school principals and vice principals, which is a separate value from the district administration, which includes district principals. What I would do differently now, I would put 6 in brackets so that you can count them with me. Yeah, because I'm not including them. I don't believe district principals get included in this data set is my point.
Yeah, I guess I go back to the ask of the board is to, when you have decreasing enrollment, there should also, you don't need as much administration moving forward. So I would hope that there's going to be a plan to address what I still feel is a higher ratio of administrators than is perhaps necessary if we're asking the increased class sizes of teachers and cutting back in counseling and learning services. So, that those are, this always goes to my functional budget dystopia that the board has to try and figure out. But anyways, I was trying to understand those numbers. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And I think your key word in that is a plan. A plan, because many of these positions are contractual to the board and would have different impact to just ongoing planning necessitate. Trustee Young.
Yeah, just kind of getting on to that. The board has had some informal discussions about succession planning, and I know that Superintendent Jory and I have raised those concerns repeatedly at our discussion meeting, and I'm hoping that soon we will have a sense of what our succession plan would look like. We are, especially at the senior admin level, some of us are getting
You want to say old, don't you?
No, I don't. I want to say a little bit longer in the tooth. And I'm included in that group, although my salary is not that great. So there you go. But the other question I have is for Mr. Amos. And, I'm such an optimist, right? I always think, yeah, we're going to get a windfall from somewhere. And I have to say, I'm much more pessimistic than I used to be. But it seems to me that in the past, we used to cover these, and I don't think this is a great way to handle things, but in the short term, through transferring from our capital to our operating. And while I don't think that's a great idea in the long term, is that something that we could consider?
Cover what? Sorry, just to fit.
You can't cover salaries and ongoing operational costs.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you can do operational reserves. You can move money from your operational reserves into local capital to cover off capital expenditures. And that's what I alluded to in that local capital budget, that we can transfer operating surpluses into local capital, but you can't transfer capital funds to cover off staffing necessarily. Like when it comes to local capital must be spent on capital type purchases. That's not to say that sometimes there's a trade that might be supporting a painting work and that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, you can't move money out of capital into operating to support staffing.
That's interesting because I thought we did that a few years ago. And I mean, we were into, our capital budget decreased considerably over that time. I don't know, maybe I'm a little off, but I thought we had done that. That's very interesting.
Unless you're talking about the operating surplus, and therefore it's already embedded in operating, and we sometimes utilize the surplus to cover off staffing.
That's
Yeah.
probably what I'm thinking of, is that we
Yes.
did that in the past, because we do
When-
have targeted funds and we can't
Correct.
touch the targeted.
Correct. So in the
Right, so-
past, we would utilize unappropriated surplus
Right.
to balance the budget, and then we would move on and see what September brought us. As you recall, our reserves, though, are depleted, not down to nil by any means. I think we've got about 600,000 remaining in there, but I don't want to, I mean, I'm certainly not proposing us to dig into that just because certainly if we had 2.6, then yes, absolutely, we would say, okay, we can make this go away by tapping into the surplus, but we can't.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Dr. Jory and then Trustee Austin.
Yeah, three categories that of thoughts that I just want to share. The first is the idea of reducing centrally or administrative burden to the budget, and we certainly hear that from our partner groups. It's top of mind every time we have these discussions. And if you recall last year, when the budget was looming and it was a very heavy burden of reductions coming, I was quite vocal about the idea of if you're going to go out there and make those reductions, you've got to start with yourself, start in your own space. And we had the opportunity there with some resignations and some retirements to make 3 reductions in central management staff and took that opportunity. There will be opportunities over not the next year necessarily, because we do need to be very careful about workload. Well, I would say expertise is probably the bigger concern, and make sure that we are doing succession planning and we're handing off these portfolios of very esoteric and specific work. But at the, as we get through that process and at the same time, our student population continues to drop down 4,100, 4,000, and perhaps even 3,900. Those conversations should happen and those decisions should be made. And as opportunities come up, I think those opportunities can and will be taken. But we've got to be careful and not rush into that, making sure that the work is going to get handed off, and that that all that knowledge that can be transferred is transferred. That's something we want to caution everybody and caution the board of. So that's thought number one. Thought number two is about that conversation that Trustee Young brought up. And one of the ongoing conversations we have as a school district is around that concept of a board legacy fund. It's not, well, it is an official thing. I guess we've actually used that phrasing, and the board has in conversation endorsed the concept of it. But as we sell properties that are access to our needs, we can take that money and then potentially do all kinds of things with it, including putting it in a high yield savings account and then using that interest for different kinds of purposes, renovations, and potentially offsetting some of those costs that are classified as capital costs. So what could we spend that on? Computers, switches, White Fleet. That category of spending could be spending burden could be reduced from capital through a fund like that. So that's a conversation that we're having, and certainly staff has been raising that issue and hopeful around us getting to a place where a fund like that could reduce burden, as well as allow our operations department to do some larger projects and some deeper work. The third category, and it's not coming up this year because we're not quite ready to do it, but it's really the final culmination of this transportation review process we've been taking on, and next fall it's our intention as staff to bring a concept to the board around reducing our busing routes. I'm sharing this publicly. And whether the board of the day, because remember, we will have elections, decides to take this on as and agree to it is going to be entirely up to them. But as you may recall, in some of the conversations we've had, including the one in January around our catchments, is that we have currently nearly 2,000 students riding buses. We have very soft walk limits, very porous walk limits, and we're going to be coming back with perhaps some smaller walk limits, meaning recognizing that kids of a certain age shouldn't be walking that far, but then holding to that and reducing the number of routes that are carrying students that are inside the walk limits currently, and reducing the number of courtesy riders in our district, which are hundreds currently, and then getting down to a number that's a little more practical. And in doing all that, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. It sounds like a really nice idea right now, if you're on this call, probably. That will be hard work to do, and politically it will be challenging, I assure you, but it is reflective of the work that's going on around the province. It's reflective of work that's been going on in districts around the province for years, and it certainly do in this district. And at the very least, we need to bring that conversation to the board. And if we're able to do that next year, there'll be a substantial relief to this budget conversation come the springtime. And even if we go down, there'll be much less pressure to reduce staffing in the ways that we've been doing it. We can come to a kind of a stasis, hopefully. So those are three things I just wanted to put out there. Obviously, at the end of the day, this is the Board of Education's decision, and we await to hear from them around what we're going to do in the meantime.
Thanks, Dr. Jory. I have Trustee Austin and then Joy Castro.
Okay, I have 4 or 5 questions that I'm just seeking greater understanding on. Do you want me to just do them all at once or do them one at a time?
Depends how difficult they are. Try one and then see what
Okay.
happens.
Well, the first one is more a comment. Ron, I'm just wondering if for next week's board meeting, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, I'm wondering if you could actually break down further what's in that category of administrators, because for me anyway, I don't think of like an ICY clinical counselor as an administrator, but that's the budget area that is coming out of. So I think it would be helpful for a number of us if it was broken down a little bit more of just who exactly is considered in that administrative pool. Because yeah, it's surprising some of the people that are in there that you don't necessarily think of as such.
No, I
always
have to listen. She's just
talking.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
then my next question is around the recommended response slide that you had. We're short 1.335 million. And then under the recommended response, it actually added up to 1.5 million when you added back in the some money coming from the province for, thank you very much. Nope, the recommended response.
I just wanted to start with this one because this is you've alluded to both of these. So yes.
Oh, okay.
This is the 1.5. This is where that gap is coming from.
Okay,
Right?
okay. Oh, right. There's my other, okay, because that's another question I have. Peter, I'm
There's-
wondering if you could elaborate for us what the collaborative teaching
You're
team.
jumping here. Hold on.
Because I have a whole,
Okay.
I have like 3 pages of notes.
All right. I'm just going to let you, you direct us at this point.
Okay, so yes, there was the 1.335. Okay, and then, okay, so that's the addition. That's what brings it up to the 1.5 is these new items. And so I'm wondering, Peter, if you could give us a little more explanation on just what the collaborative teaching team is and the mentorship is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. As you recall, in years past, we had a group of teachers who were supporting their colleagues around the district, called them the Teaching and Learning Team, and they had various responsibilities. We charged them with different kinds of tasks, typically around literacy and numeracy, but other endeavors as well. We were faced with that significant shortfall and found that this is one of the ways that we could get at the reduction. The collaborative teaching team is a similar concept, but as I mentioned earlier, we'd be looking at part-time positions, and this particular ask would be approximately 5 part-time staff members to start, with some additional travel and release time, so that they could collaborate not just in their own sites, but more fulsomely than that. We are in conversation with our MATA partners around that. We have the draft of a LU ready to go. It's not quite signed. It's not quite there, but I think we're close to an agreement. And this is an ask as a way to get at that same need in a much more fiscally efficient way, and recognizing that this type of work is still needed. There's still an appetite for it. But in challenging times, we're going to need to do it at a smaller scale. What you're asking is, is this the time to do it? Could this wait? How it doesn't maybe feel great pairing it against other reductions. And I fully understand all those notions. Ultimately, we're going to be asking the board to make a decision on whether they go forward with it or not. And however it turns out, we will carry on and continue to do the work in the best way that we can. My one piece of wisdom on this is that it's not a good idea to reduce learning in an organization of any type. All the research that is available on the topic says don't stop doing those things that sharpen the saw, so to speak. But that being said, sometimes you're going to have to make hard choices and be frugal around that. And then, as we use the word plan, in make sure that we are having a plan to get at that and not let it fall to the wayside for too long. So that's the collaborative teaching team. The mentorship is a concept that the MATA brought to us earlier in the year. It's a partnership. Their funds matched with our funds, and the intention, as I understand it, is to put groups of teachers in rooms with release time, give them some structure around curricular conversations, hopefully deepen their understanding of the curriculum, and give them a chance to share strategies. Not just I think vertical alignment is something that is really I think has a lot of potential here. Understanding how the curriculum stays the same and changes from K to 1 to 2 to 3 and so on, and give them a chance to really share strategies that they think are effective and to parse out those areas of focus, so that they can better meet the needs of our kids. And so that number is an arbitrary number. I think we started off with 50 apiece at one point in our conversations. We've winnowed it down a little bit due to cost pressures, but we do believe that there's some merit to that expense. And of course, the other one there is a communications plan, and once again, having some access to expertise, not to do work per se. I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about upping the level of skill and understanding around how to more effectively communicate with the system, and to help us align our schools in their practices, and to maximize the use of the new website and whatever other tools that are at our disposal to fulfill the intentions of the communications plan. And we just pegged that number at 20 for now.
Thanks, Peter. I see other people have their hands up. I have more questions, but I think I'll let other people go first, and maybe you can circle back to me given time. Thank you.
Great. Or maybe you can have them offline with Mr. Ames as well. Ms. Castro, go ahead, please.
So my name is Joy Daniel. I'm an
Okay.
Alta teacher at PATH. I just was curious if the wellness survey that was put out, I believe it was, I don't know if it was around Christmas or around like if the wellness survey was ever really looked at, and I'm curious of the relationship between time and overall stir and wellness, because I was previously at KSS when the culture was really, really good, and now I'm at PATH, and I think we have a positive culture, and I just feel like throwing it on COVID, is that like...
Okay, you were kind of garbled up because I think your drive,
Is that based on time? And I am, but I'm not. I'm hands-free driving. I'm about to stop
Okay.
in 1 second at KSS.
okay, the wellness survey is part of, was followed up, possibly, Dr. Jory, you could, address, but I didn't hear all the question, that, Joy had there, and I'm not sure it impacts our budget discussion per se
Yep.
right
So
now.
it doesn't strike me as a budget conversation, and we're not putting our own wellness staff on the line here in the budget conversation. It felt like that position, in times like this, and I'm talking about COVID times and post-COVID times when there are certainly heightened concerns around staff wellness, that we should still keep a position like that, and we think that the work is valuable. In regard to that survey, it was summarized, and the summary was sent out to all the schools. And so here's the things that are going fairly well according to the survey. Here's the things where that were recognized as challenges. And all of our principals were invited to have discussions with their staff on how they might get at those challenges. By my recollection, one of those challenges was burnout, workload related or otherwise. And then one of the other challenges, I believe, was around appreciation. And I know that's something that the Board of Education is very interested in. Its appreciation could be a very personal thing, and so we're hoping that our principals can gather information about how they and the board may do or show that appreciation more effectively. So that's how that information was used.
Yeah, and I think it is relevant because if you look at how many sick days have increased, I mean, sure, it could be COVID related, but I mean, when employees don't feel, and this is in a corporate environment as well as a public, when you feel expendable or like going through recent layoffs, you do feel like you don't matter and the work that you do doesn't matter. It's important when we're doing all this hard work for the students that we really care about. So I think it is relevant, and staff that doesn't feel that, I mean, sure, we'll take our entitled sick days, right? And I'm one to work because I care too much, right? So I think it is something that is important and should be looked at. That's it.
Thanks very much, Joy. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thanks very much, Joy. Thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that to our
attention. I'll move now to Mr. Warniak. Go ahead, Ray.
Thank you, Chair Flynn. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to ask a few questions, and I do have a few questions. I guess my first question might just kind of follow off that last comment, and I'm curious if trustees have discussed how cuts to EA and support staff lead to higher stress leave costs for a school district.
Well, we're certainly losing students, and we're losing students and that require EA support. So there isn't necessarily a direct line to be able to look at impact at this point. But yes, it's in our minds at all times as to what impacts the classroom with any of these cuts.
Okay, thank you. And have trustees received a staff either report or summary identifying potential savings through management restructuring?
Not at this point, no.
Have trustees been advised on how reductions across administrative departments could help avoid cuts to students facing support roles?
We've looked at the potential of succession planning with senior roles. I don't think we could say we have a direct line to where that will take us to supports in the classroom, because at this point we have declining enrollment, and proceeding to the next few years, we will have the same. And so, as I think it was alluded to originally, this needs to be a plan.
Yeah. Thanks. Have trustees discussed whether reductions to classroom support staffing could create downstream financial pressures through students leaving SD 69 to homeschool for private and alternative schools, lowering enrollment and increasing teacher burnout?
Not directly under those categories, no.
What assurances can trustees provide parents that teachers that every reasonable administrative efficiency has been exhausted before further reducing supports that directly affect students?
I think that's been the process of our whole evening's discussion. We try to keep everything as much as we can away from the classroom and the impact on our students. So that is their job.
Thank you. And I think with the earlier questions, and just kind of like the answers I got, I guess my next question would be, which trustees will support an increase in this year's budget to Schedule 2B under line item other professionals?
I can't answer on behalf of the other trustees, and I don't think that's relevant to our discussions here this evening. So no, I could not
Trustee
I could not commit
Young
on
and
another.
Carol Kellogg asked me to ask that question at this meeting tonight.
Yep, that's fine. And that's fine to ask the question. I appreciate it, but I cannot ask my fellow trustees to make that commitment or answer that question this evening. Any further questions?
I do. Can trustees clarify whether the district's current administrative structure reflects a declining enrollment realities and a declining fiscal flexibility, or whether there are opportunities for organizational streamlining?
I think we're always looking ahead to organizational streamlining, as you put it, and that is a long-term plan. It does not happen in a mere few months in time. These are contract employees, and I think we have it ever top of mind right now with continued years of declining enrollment confronting us.
And how much of the current budget shortfall is planned to be covered by cutting direct student services versus administrative overhead?
I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
So next week, next Friday, the board meeting agenda will be released with the proposed budget for the trustees to vote on right after the weekend. And there's still a lot of questions that can't be answered. I really appreciate this opportunity tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Young, and then I will circle back to Trustee Austin, who had further questions. Trustee Young.
I'm still trying to figure out a little bit what Mr. Warniak was saying when I said that he should ask. I think people should ask questions in public. That's what we're here for. And to all of your points, that's what we've been talking about through this whole cycle, are the things that you brought up. And so I don't know. But anyway, I want to get on to other stuff. So thank you, Norberta. Hopefully you're still here. Way back when, in the old days, I think I graduated from grad school in 93. So in 93, I came out and I was a high school counselor, and I had 250 kids, and it was really good. And that's the way it should be. But that's not the way it is. I have a vision too, that all of our students should graduate from elementary school with basic skills around cooking, around sewing, around numeracy, literacy, all that kind of stuff. We're doing our best that we can with that. And I also would like all of our graduates to graduate with meaningful graduation, including some sense of what they want to do in the future, and as educated citizens who are critical thinkers. I have these visions. The reality now is quite different, and we have to make some very, very difficult decisions here. I did want to speak to the priorities that we got from the Indigenous Education Council, because I think these are important. Safety and belonging for staff and students. And they indicated all students is top priority. It is for me as well. Language and cultural awareness, and we spoke to that. That's one of the positives that's coming forward. And I really appreciate going to Hulkaminam lessons and trying to learn the language of our people here, and that academics remain critically important. So those all I agree with, and we need to keep working on. I've spoken before in policy about belonging coming first. I still believe that it comes first. I have to say, I've always supported us doing pilot programs, but I'm backing off from that now because we do these pilot programs for 3 years. They're great programs, and then the funding disappears. So I don't know. And finally,
are you speaking about the seamless daycare as an example?
Seamless daycare, yeah, and the mental health. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, no, fair enough.
We do good stuff, right?
Oh,
and then it's gone. I did want, before everybody leaves, I want them to know that our advocacy doesn't end here. And Mr. Amos's group, BC ASBO, put together a fabulous report that went to the government that said, you are not giving us enough money. And we say that at BCSTA all the time. I'm pretty sure the superintendents say this. It's not like we go down without a fight. And this is just going to be a really, really difficult decision. Looking for other ways out, that was the motivation for Trustee Austin's proposal about not funding private schools. That's just where we're at, and that's what I'm elected for. I'll make the hard decisions.
Trustee Austin, you've hand up, hand down. Are you going to be furthering your questions?
Well, and this is a public meeting, so I would like to shoot it over to Ray if he has another question. Again, I see his hand up, and I don't want us to run out of time before our public gets asked.
Ray's already spoken. I think we have a new speaker, Conrad Lingemeyer, and I could go back to Ray after. Conrad.
Okay. Well, then, okay. Yep.
Hi, folks. Sorry, my camera doesn't seem to be working right now. Somehow it's set for forward-facing camera, and it doesn't point towards my face. But I just have a question about how we make decisions. So we have heard many times that it is difficult to determine the staffing level of the admin positions to align with their budget reality because of the implications of our contractual obligations and the continuum of knowledge for those administration positions. However, I've also heard that the district is able to look into long-term planning with intimate knowledge of population projections it uses to determine staffing. But those two things seem to be at odds with each other. So I'm not sure if someone can help me figure this out, but how is it that we are perplexed by shifting student population when it comes to staffing administration, but we are also able to make careful reductions to staffing at the same time? So it seems like we're saying two different things for two different reasons.
I think staffing, the analytics for the student population comes from Berger, and that's demographic, longitudinal, childbirths, tons of stuff from planning departments on buildings and build outs in our community. And I don't quite know how you're wanting to see a difference between that and planning of senior administration and administration staffing. If you could walk us a
Sure.
little bit further down that path, because the actual statistical gathering of student population is quite substantial. It's also held its own for as long as I've been a trustee. Berger is bang on. We are conservative in our look at our demographics of our population and the incoming student population over time. And so I'm not sure where you want a connection made.
Well, Eve, what you just said is very helpful, actually. So we are able to use the data that's given to us by that organization you just spoke of to make sure that we are staffing our schools with the professional staff and support staff to reflect the population of incoming students or exiting students from our schools. But at the same time, using this data, it's very difficult, it seems very difficult for any kind of consideration for administration. It could be upper administration or PVP, whichever way you want to fold those numbers. So it seems that like when it comes to talking about professional staff and support staff, we can use that data very surgically to make sure that we are providing the right staffing. But when we are thinking ahead using that same data, it is tricky to make appropriate adjustments to administration and PVP. So I'm just wondering how come the data works sometimes for some people, but not for others?
Well, I think I'll let Dr. Jory go.
Thanks, Conrad. I agree with that notion that you're coming up with. If we can be predictive about it in one category, why aren't we predictive about it in another category? And what I'll say is when you're talking about your unionized workers, we have collective agreements in place where there is, literally pages of language that determine how we add staff and then how we take away staff depending on our needs. There's not language like that in the collective. Well, we don't have collective agreement for exempt staff. Everybody has a personal services contract. And all of those contracts have some kind of stipulation around if they're reduced by choice of the board, that we still pay them. And so what I have told the board, and this is not just for you, for everybody, is if you want to start reducing these positions, I can come up with methodologies that would draw them down. But you always have to keep in mind that you're going to be either paying them to do nothing or paying them to do at this level to do different types of work, and that's a very inefficient way to do business. As was mentioned before, when we have retirements, when we have people leaving of their own choice, we are, at that particular point, have an opportunity that we can make reductions and not end up paying people to not do their job. So it's a much more practical way to go about it. But once again, you're not always aware of of what people are going to do, and it's not appropriate to actually ask them. So I have lots of ideas about where we're going to go next. That's not for public consumption, but as I've alluded to a couple of different times, we need to deal with the issue of succession planning, and then there's going to be opportunities after that to make sure that the system is right sized in this category again.
Thanks, Dr. Jory. Mr. Warniak. You're on mute.
Thanks for this opportunity again. And I don't know if this is completely appropriate, but I just want to clarify and that on May 13th, I did receive an email from 2 trustees, and I can quote, "I will be happy to answer this question if asked at the public session." And both trustees offered to answer the question if I asked at the public session. I just want everyone here to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Austin, further questions that you wish to address this evening?
Yes, thank you. Ron, you mentioned there's some exempt staff increases to the tune of $160,000, but we don't know yet whether that will be provincially funded. This reminds me, this is reminiscent of the P and VP rise of a few years ago, when we didn't know at budget time whether the province would be funding that or fully funding it or not. When will we know about that?
They
We won't.
indicated end of June that there'd be
No.
more information on it.
Because, and, $160,000 makes a difference. Because
5 years ago, Julie, you'll remember the figure was $320,000 because your principals and vice principals are considered exempt staff. And we did not get funded in past. We have had maybe a sunshine moment, but that figure before was $320,000.
And this one is 160. So I'm just.
And extending that, support staff is still unresolved, right? Support staff is still a provincially, they've ratified provincially, but we haven't ratified locally. We haven't bargained locally. So there's a few unknowns going into this budget. Absolutely. I think that's really what the crux of your question is that there's still some unknowns, and that's to be expected because not everything is known going forward. As I said, support staff may not be known until February of 2027. What we have heard for the teacher staffing going into 27, 28, or the teacher salary adjustments, we'll know the funding is what they've indicated by the end of June, and that might include letting us know on the exempt staff whether or not it is funded. So those two we may know by the end of June, but it's kind of after the fact. What they're sharing out with districts basically saying is generally speaking, until the funds are announced, you don't put it in your budget. So we're going in. So we're going in with a couple of unknowns, but that's not unusual because oftentimes this time of year, we're not even, I won't say confident, we don't know for sure how many kids we're going to see in September anyways. That's what projections are all about. And I think we've heard from Trustee Young, she's very good at reiterating or reaffirming that budgets are a moving target. Budgets are not cast in stone. And so this is where we're at, is as best we know. These are the values that we can place in the budget. These are the wonders. And until we do the amended budget come January of 2027, there's still going to be some things that are unknown.
Okay. And so it would be interesting, though, to know if the province does come back and say, yeah, we're going to fund that, and that money can go back into our operations budget, what would we put it toward? So that's just a question I'm throwing out there. And then my next question. Oh, okay.
No, I was gonna follow up. We were actually in this position. It was a 3-year collective agreement. So we were in this position. We were in this position 3 years ago, effectively, a year, 3 plus a year, going into the budget deliberations, not knowing if the exempt staff was going to be funded. And we did the same thing then. We put a caveat in there that said we need to cover this off until we know something different. And what we were able to do come September, when we knew the funds were there, much like a lot of the September count and the recalculation, we were able to find funds for other for other areas that needed attention come September and the fall adjustments that we always do.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think I'm just sort of looking at what our priorities would be if we did get that back. My other question is around the proposed reduction of teachers and EAs is in direct proportion to the declining enrollment of almost 100 students. And unfortunately, it doesn't work, in the real world that those 100 students equate to 3 classrooms or something. That would make it much easier. But it's, a couple of students here and a couple of students here and 1 student there, which doesn't necessarily, in my mind anyway, equate to that reduction in teacher and or EA time. And do we have the statistics, the data that says how many of those 100 students actually did need that EA support, that we are being reduced? And is that I think Jillian or somebody referenced that's a direct correlation. There's a direct correlation between of those 100 students, X amount, had the used EA support. I'd like to see that data at some point in the next week. And the other one was around, the seamless childcare. And Elaine's already mentioned that's run out this year to the tune of $55,000, and so we're picking that up. Is that right?
The seamless day, with the seamless day, I alluded to the fact that the integrated program will be discontinued, but and maybe Associate Superintendent Wilson can speak to it, but again, the lens is that we are going to be adding a program or enhancing the program at Arrington, which is where the seamless day was, to give opportunities for before and after school programming.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One more quick question. This doesn't have to be answered tonight, but it's just something perhaps I can get some data from our staff about. Again, Ron, you mentioned and that Peter has made presentations to us around our numeracy and literacy levels, and there's some positive response there, and that's great, and the work that's being done. But I'm wondering, because in years past when we've had reductions in EAs, and sometimes it's been related to a drop in student enrollment, and sometimes it's been perhaps looking at different approaches to supporting our students. That it's not necessarily always this way. There's different ways of supporting our students, which I can understand. I'm just wondering if we have data to support that loss of those EAs that we've had in previous years has led to positive outcomes in the classroom, and when we've taken on some of these other different approaches. Thanks.
That's a takeaway then for our senior team. Might be difficult to actually quantify in its all right, but maybe the FESL will help us out on this one. Trustee Young.
Yeah, thanks, Trustee Austin, for those questions. They're certainly something to consider. To Mr. Werniak, I think what you're asking is, would I be in favor of cutting administration in order to, reduce the number of layoffs? I think that's what you're getting at here. And the simple answer is what I'm seeing is a decline in enrollment, and that decline in enrollment leads us to a situation which has been explained quite extensively here, where we do have to cut some teaching staff. Now, having said that, and putting my optimistic hat back on, it may be that in our September count, we see that we have more students coming into our system, or we have more children with needs that can be designated, or we just have some kind of windfall, like Trustee Austin was relating to, that maybe we won't have these expenses that we're looking at right now. We always budget. And this is just a principle in accounting. You always budget a little bit more conservatively than you hope will happen. That's just what you do. So I am a person who believes in inclusive practice. I believe that we need to support our enrolling and non-enrolling specialists. I think that EAs are really important in the system. All of those things point to, if there are changes to this budget, I would support more inclusive practice. I think there's much more we could be doing. In terms of administrative, I've spoken to the fact that this is a longer term plan, and that we are looking at it. And I have raised some things at our informal meetings, our discussion meetings, which are non-decision making. With regard to, do we want as many VPs as we have? So I have raised those. and I will continue to raise them at those meetings. Having said that, I don't know what else we can do around the suggestions that staff has made. I've been at all the meetings. I've listened to all the talk. I think you can understand, because you're an administrator yourself, that you do have to have some level of administration at an organization in order to have it run well. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Does that clarify for you?
It helps a lot. My question really was very specific to Schedule 2B, the line item other professionals, and that directly is the 5%. It's 5% of our budget goes to pay the highest paid people in our school district. And I think just even a couple of years ago, we gave an extra $300,000 a year to pay people who are making $200,000 a year, give or take. And that $300,000 a year is a every year expense. And I don't know how many EAs we can have for $300,000 a year. But I feel it would be enough to relieve the teacher burnout a little bit, to relieve the stress leave, to relieve the sick leave. And I'm really wondering if this year, if that top 5% of earners are getting another big pay raise, and if the trustees support that, or if the trustees are going to maybe say, well, you make quite a bit, you probably have a comfortable life. Let's think about the children, let's think about the families, and let's hold off your raise and keep some more staff on.
Thanks for your comments, Ray. I've got Norberta and then Ms. Stavro.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I'm hearing the talks of reductions. However, I think it's really important to note that, for example, Bolinas currently has over 1,000 students plus 40. And we are already projecting, because again, I'm firsthand doing the work and looking at the numbers. And in its totality, it's over that number. However, Bolinas is going to lose 0.5 of a counselor. So even though in the books it shows 0.8, our own school is going to lose 0.5 of a counselor. And I know there is also reduction of learning services time. And we do also hear that some students' needs might change from the cohort that moves through in secondary. But we also know that some of the private programs are changing their scope, which might directly impact our schools in the fall. And when it comes to students with needs, it's not something that you want to plan in a reactive manner. You want to start planning now. In fact, our grade 7 schools right now are talking with our admin, with our learning support teams in terms of what we call articulation, which is really knowing the student and saying, here are the students that you are receiving. And guess what? Many of them do not have a designation. And it's even more so in the elementary. So when we talk about students with particular needs or recognized needs, there are fewer and fewer of them on the books because they're not getting assessed, because we don't have enough staffing to assess them and to designate them. And then we have students with needs that we are asked to wait and see. But at the same time, the teacher in front of the classroom, the learning support services teacher, the counselor, and admin are all working with that child to make them feel safe, regulated, and ready to learn. And so if we're talking about the numbers, I think revisiting where we're at this moment in time may be in order, because I don't see a direct correlation with fewer students and a necessary cut needed at my own school. And so I really beg the staff and trustees particularly to be curious about that, to track that and to look for that. Because I know in my own school, I will see more kids, the school kids than they ever saw in September. And we may have more needs than before, or in particular pockets that require more preventative and interventive like services. Like you need more interventions for the kids with needs because you just don't plunk them into a high school class. And so it's really important. Look at the sevens coming into the high school. Do we have appropriate services to support those kids coming in? Because let me tell you, the amount of interventions and the amount of supports that's needed in grade 8 is higher than those needed in grade 12. Just because of their age, their developmental needs, their emotional, social needs, and also the very fact of recognizing that they're in a transition. Thanks. Oh, and I do recognize, because I've worn different hats, and I do recognize the tough work that's done in budgets. And but again, I will stress, it is all about priorities. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to priorities. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. Jenna?
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I just want to start off by saying I have a question, and it's not on behalf of DPAC at all. I'm just speaking as an individual. But I did note a line item in particular in the budget there that I wanted to ask about, and that was regarding some new spending and the idea of some communication spending. And from my following along, and I know it's hard to make every meeting, I had believed that the amount kind of earmarked was going to be at least about 30,000, and it looks like that's been changed to 20,000. I'm wondering if that's new. And then I did just want to maybe speak to, from a parent perspective, trying to understand what's going on in the district, trying to understand when to, sign up for busing or not, or this or that, how important that piece is. And I think that there could be some real cost savings. Communications is generally one where you can find real efficiencies if you can make the whole system move better and together and have all stakeholders on the same page, which I feel like some of the quivering voices and other things, we don't always necessarily feel all on the same page. And I think that might be a great place to invest a bit of funds. So I'm just wondering if that 20,000, maybe that was already discussed with trustees and brought up at the communications working group and it never kind of trickled down to me, or maybe that is a difference in the budget recommendation that's being put forward by admin. So I'll let you guys answer.
So I think originally we saw the 30,000 piece about a month and a half ago when the communications plan working group put some ideas to the table, not a fixed amount but 30,000 did pop up. I think as we've heard from many viewpoints today, this is the discussion of priorities. So the reduction that has been presented tonight has been made as a conscious place to land, and what we could do with $20,000 to have a communications plan move forward in ways that we maybe have never been able to do before. We've had communications monies earmarked for years and years and years in our budget, but we just haven't been able to get to it. But I think you have heard tonight many different priorities that have price tags attached to them, and that this is where the trustees land with their difficult decision making to come to terms with that figure versus something else.
So trustees were already aware that the proposal for the budget going forward is 20,000 rather than 30,000. The number is new to us, the public, this evening. Am I correct in that?
It was in a draft that we visited about a week ago as to what this evening's presentation would look like. There is nothing to say that we as trustees could up that if we wanted to. That is the place we're at.
Okay. And I think from watching that work, I think it might be an area for some more significant consideration. Again, as a parent and kind of knowing some of the behind the scenes, I feel like there's maybe a lot of admin and staff and trustee time that's dedicated to things that maybe wouldn't come up if there was somebody who even, you know, a part-time staff member that was like, hey, let's massage it like this. Let's make sure we're being proactive on some communications. Since if I may, Chair, I just also wanted to make sure that I was very clear on kind of the crystallization coming out of this, and it goes to communications, because after this meeting, parents and people are going to ask us like, so, hey, what happened? I couldn't log in. And so generally what I'm seeing is, you know, the recommendation is that $1.24 million will be cut and needs to be cut. Cuts are happening in learning support, CYCs, EAs, counselors, and teachers. And that is very likely what will go forward for a vote May 26th for approval, unless trustees reconsider somehow, and that this week would be the opportunity for people to, I guess, reach out to trustees. And we will see what happens on the 26th. Am I correct in kind of just, that's really the nuts and bolts of it?
Yep, that's the nuts and bolts, and it will be on the website. This presentation and this reading, as you know, is recorded, so folks can go back in and have a look and see where the deliberations took us based on feedback from everybody. To say what lands on the 26th from a trustee or all trustees coming to some different tact, that would be is an option too. That could happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I think people are maybe getting a little worn out this evening, but Trustee Young and then Trustee Austin, do you have anything further you'd like to add to the proceedings and the information to be shared tonight?
Yeah, just to Jenna's comment, when you put that out, Jenna, it would be very nice if you also said, you know, that's because of the lowered enrollment. I mean, I am tying that to the lowered enrollment. And also on the communications plan, I think the piece of information for me that came in between was the situation with ISP, which came to our Finance and Ops committee meeting, and it was a really good report. So take a look at that. It was a little bit, well, it's contributing a little bit less than I had hoped for. So just with those two changes. Thanks.
Caveats. Yep. Trustee Austin for.
Yeah, two quick things about the communications. I think everybody recognizes how important that is, and absolutely, you're right. There may be efficiencies found if we had a designated communications person or something, but I think given this, but within the working group, there was not a consensus if that was a recommendation to go forward, having that kind of money, and actually to have a designated person. You're not going to get somebody of that caliber that we would need, I think, to create those efficiencies for even $50,000. It would be significantly higher for somebody with that skill set. And so it was a real challenge coming into this budget with, as you've seen tonight, some of the real challenges. So it's really difficult. I feel like the 20,000 is almost like the compromise number. We might be able to you know, get somebody with a little bit of expertise to come in and give us a little push and get us going. We have the new website, you know, the new apps and things like that. But I don't think this was the year that we wanted to commit to that communications person, to find somebody of that caliber. You know, for a limited kind of money, that just, I don't think that was going to happen. But I think it's definitely on our radar, as it is every year. And hopefully we can just keep making things better and better, but definitely understand some of the frustrations, and we are working on them. The other thing in terms of the passing of the budget may or may not happen next week. I know personally, from my perspective as a trustee, if I don't feel like my questions have been fully answered, then I won't be voting to pass the budget. We do have till the end of June. So just to toss that out there as well.
Yep, that was in the last slide in the presentation. So seeing no further hands at this time, I thank everybody for joining us this evening. This is a difficult process. It's not easily digested as much as anything, all the information, but then to create priorities and then for each trustee to weigh how that factors into their decision making is the tough work of our job for sure. And annually at this time, it's never been easy, never been easy. So thank you very much, Mr. Amos, for your presentation. Any parting remarks that you'd like to make since you've got your hand up?
I was just going to comment. Jenna's actual observation was spot on in terms of her understanding of where we're going and what comes next. My messaging out would be naturally, unless I hear different, unless I hear trustees saying no, 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 I will prepare the budget based on this presentation. I will prepare the budget based on these recommendations, and that will be the document that will be put forward to the board for next week, but made public the end of this week. And then to Trustee Austin's point, it's up to the board to entertain the budget that's been presented and recommended by staff, and then they may or may not obviously pass it all in one night. And again, that's normal processes, recognizing that motions of this nature need unanimity or all 5 members to vote in support of passing it in one night. Otherwise, these types of what they call bylaw or financial motions need to be passed over a series of board meetings. And so that's what you would end up seeing if should a member of the board not vote in favor of unanimity, therefore making it known that they're not going to pass it in one night, then they can proceed with motions or with recommendations back to staff, and then for future discussion at a later time. That's the process. But yes, this presentation will effectively be the background to the budget document that the board will see next week. That's it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Amos. And thank you everybody for your thoughtful questions and input. We appreciate it. Participation is difficult, but we appreciate. I think at the height of things, I saw 56 people in attendance, and I think that's awesome for a budget meeting for us. So thank you very much, everyone. Have an enjoyable evening, what's left of it, and we look forward to next week. Good night.